Kingdom Explorers. I'm Miss Kim.
And I'm Mr. Josh, and welcome to another edition of Backyard Kingdom Explorers. It's a beautiful day again out here today, and I think Miss Kim wants to show you some of the things I've been doing in the backyard since I showed you what she's been working on in the backyard. We also have an update on Copper and how his surgery went.
All right, let's go. Okay, y'all remember Copper? Well, he had surgery and it went well, but now he is in the cone of shame to keep him from licking his incision. But he's doing very well and he's walking much better.
All right, guys, today I've been working on a backyard barbecue. I really like to cook ribs, and so when I cook ribs, I tend to cook way more than what we need. I like to cook for a lot of people. Like on Mother's Day, I like to cook for Miss Kim and Miss Cynthia's whole family. They have two sisters, so there's a lot of mothers in there, and I like to give them a break. They cook for us a lot, so I like to cook for them sometimes. Or on Easter, I cook for my mom's family, all my aunts and uncles. But today, I have ribs. Now it's time for these to come out and do a little resting. And get my tongs here. And since I like to cook for a lot of people, instead of cooking just 1 or 2 racks of ribs, like I would for our family, I've cooked 4. And we'll be taking some of these out and doing surprise drops to my parents and Miss Kim's parents later on today. So while I continue to work on these ribs, let's go to Miss Cynthia for another lesson about sharing our food.
Hey guys, today we're having Bible class out in the woods again, and I want to talk to you for a little while about camping. So you can see I've got some of my favorite camping supplies right here today. Different people do camping different ways. So some people like to stay in a cabin, or some people will stay in a camper or a tent. But no matter what style of camping you like to do, you probably want to pack some supplies. Well, today's Bible story is about a guy named Elijah, and God sent him on a camping trip without any supplies at all. So Elijah was a prophet of God, and that just means that he was one of God's messengers. Now, we've studied about several of Israel's kings. We talked about King David, and we've talked about King Saul. Oh, y'all, bugs out here. Okay, that's okay, because I've got one of my basic camping supplies right here. So, we've talked about King Saul, we've talked about King Solomon also. Today's lesson is a little bit further along in the Bible, and it's found in 1 Kings chapter 17 and 18, and it's about a guy named King Ahab. And King Ahab was just a bad king. Now, we know from our Saul, David, and Solomon lessons that everybody makes mistakes, and that sometimes, we do good things and we do bad things, but Ahab was just a bad king. And he had a wife named Jezebel, and she was the queen, and she was worse than he was, really. But they worshipped not God, but a false god named Baal. And all the people started doing it as well. And God sent Elijah to King Ahab and Queen Jezebel to tell them that there was going to be a drought in the land. And it wasn't going to rain again until God told Elijah to say that it was. So he told him, and then he kind of got ready to go into hiding. God said, go off in the wilderness. And God sent Elijah on a camping trip with no supplies. He didn't have his sleeping bag or his ice chest with food, or so when I go on a camping trip, I always have a snack nearby. Elijah didn't have any snacks. He just went out in the wilderness. But God sent him to a creek, so he was by some water. And the ravens brought Elijah food. They brought him bread and meat every morning and every night. So Elijah didn't need those snacks and food that we would normally pack, because God took care of him. And that reminds me of our memory verse. It's Psalm 46, verse 1. And it's, God is my refuge and strength, an ever-present help in times of trouble. And God will take care of you just the way he took care of Elijah. Now, I've got a few more Elijah stories to tell you before it's all over with. So stay tuned and meet me right back here.
This week we have a fun activity for you to do. We're going to make some bread. In our Bible lesson, Elijah was brought bread by the ravens, and then the widow shared her bread with Elijah, even though she was scared they wouldn't have enough food to eat after she shared. But God provided for her, and he kept refilling her jar of flour and olive oil. Which brings me to our Bible memory verse this week. Psalm 46:1.
God is our refuge and our strength and ever-present help in trouble.
So Sarah, I'm going to let you go ahead and mix the ingredients together. Our bread today is going to be similar to that the widow had. Okay, Sarah, go ahead and mix your 1 cup of flour. With 1/3 cup of olive oil. And we're making ours in a KitchenAid. Obviously, lift the bowl up. Obviously, they didn't have a KitchenAid. 1 teaspoon of salt, Sarah. And add your warm water a little bit at a time until your dough becomes the right consistency. We used gluten-free flour, so yours may look a little bit different than ours did. But you're going to take your ball of dough, ours is a little crumbly, and you're going to break off pieces of it and pat it flat out on the cookie sheet to bake. So we ended up using our rolling pin to get it nice and flat. Sarah, go ahead and poke some holes in the bread. And sprinkle the top with olive oil. And you're going to bake it in the oven 425 degrees for 8 to 10 minutes.
We sprinkled salt on the top, and now we're going to put it in the oven and come check on it in about 10 minutes.
Sarah, while our bread is baking, we're going to go over the prayer requests for
Yeah.
the week. We're going to pray for the poor, sick, and traveling like we always do. We're going to pray for the Dominican Republic. And this week we want to add the tornado damage onto our prayer requests, not just here in our area, but all over the southern United States.
Definitely.
People had their houses. We're going to pray that the coronavirus goes away. We're going to pray for Lainey's family because she had a death in her family. We're going to pray for Miss Cassie. It's Henry and Chloe's mom. She is sick with the coronavirus right now, so we're going to pray for healing for her. We're going to pray for Kyler's family. His family is doing much better and getting better, but they still need prayers. And Miss Carrie is feeling much better this week, so we're going to give praise and thanks for God to healing her. Silas's family, also, we need to pray for them. They had a death in the family. Aunt Shirley that we were praying for passed away. Okay, so we're going to get the flatbread out of the oven. Ours had to cook a little longer than 10 minutes, but it's getting brown and crispy on the edges there. So we're going to let it cool and then cut it into pieces. Okay, so we cut up our bread.
But it really tastes more like a cracker.
But this week we're going to remember to always trust God and that He will provide for us and take care of us. And don't forget to wash your hands.
So I know you guys can see that there's plenty of water behind me. We've had tons of rain lately. But the longer Elijah lived by that creek, the drier it got, and eventually it dried up to where Elijah didn't have any water to drink. So God sent him to a village. And in this village, he found a woman and he asked her for some water. And while she was getting the water, he said, "Oh, can you give me some bread too?" And she said, "Sir, I've got a little bit of flour and a little bit of oil left. I'm going to make a loaf of bread for myself and my son, and then we're going to die." Things were pretty bleak for them right then. They were low on supplies. They hadn't had any rain in a long time. But Elijah said, "No, wait. I need you to trust God, to trust me. God will provide for us." And so she went ahead and made the bread and she shared it with Elijah. And the most amazing thing happened. Her jars never ran out. She made bread for herself and her son and Elijah every day. And every day they had food to eat and they never ran out. So God provided for them in a big way. So while Elijah was still living with the widow, her son got really sick and he stopped breathing and he died. And of course the woman was very upset, but Elijah once again trusted God, and he took the boy in his arms and he carried him upstairs and he cried out to God and he prayed over this child, And God brought this boy back to life. And that's just one more example of how God provided for this woman because she had faith and she trusted in God. And we should trust in God too, because God's going to take care of us no matter what happens. So my last Elijah story today is one of my favorites. It had been 3 years since it rained in the land of Israel. And God came to Elijah and told him that it's time to go talk to King Ahab. Now, Elijah had really been in hiding from King Ahab and Queen Jezebel because they had killed all of God's prophets. In fact, Elijah was the only one left. So he listened to God just like he always did. He obeyed him and he headed down to find King Ahab. And when King Ahab saw him, he said he recognized him and he called him a troublemaker. And Elijah's like, I'm not the troublemaker. You're the one that's causing trouble for Israel. And they decided to have a contest. And so they were going to meet on Mount Carmel. And Baal, their false god that they worshipped, all of the Baal prophets were going to come, and all of God's prophets, which was just Elijah now, were going to come, and they were going to offer sacrifice to their God. And God was supposed to provide the fire. So whichever God provided the fire was the true God. So there were 450 Baal prophets, and they all came to this mountain, and they built their altar, and they sacrificed a bull, and they put it on top of the altar, and then they started praying to Baal. And they prayed, and they sang, and they yelled, and they danced around the altar. Nothing happened. Of course nothing happened, because Baal is not a god. But Elijah sat back and watched. And it's kind of funny because he sort of kind of teased them a little bit. He ridiculed them some. He was like, maybe Baal's asleep right now. Or maybe he's just busy. Maybe you should shout louder. Maybe he's taking a nap. So he kind of ridiculed them just a little bit. Of course, by the end of the day, nothing had happened. And so then Elijah's like, all right, it's my turn. And he builds his altar. And he digs a trench around it, so it's like a ditch. And then he puts the sacrificed bull on the altar, and he has the servants pour water all over the altar. And then he says, let's do that again. Pour water all over the altar again. And then one more time, they did it a third time. So 3 times they poured water over the altar. There was so much water, there was like a little moat all the way around the altar. And Elijah prays to God, and God sends fire down from heaven. And not only does the fire burn up the entire bull and the wood and the altar, it eats and consumes all the water in the ditch around the altar. So that fire consumes everything there. And the people are just amazed, and they see that and they know that God is the one true God. I'm so glad you guys could join me today for our Elijah lessons. They're in 1 Kings chapter 17 and 18. I think you should go and read the whole thing because there's lots of little fun details in there that I left out, but I know you would enjoy reading. Remember, God is my refuge and my strength, an ever-present help in times of trouble. Love you guys.